The night was pitch. Around the Valhallan's position, unseen things moved in the darkness, drawing slowly, inexorably closer. Wyrdvane mopped at his bloody nose with a rag and tried to ignore the muttering of the infantrymen around him. He squashed the familiar spike of resentment as he caught the words mutant and cursed. These are not bad men, he told himself, just scared and ignorant. Yet that might make them more dangerous. It was time to remind them that the Wyrdvane Psykers were powerful servants of the Emperor. Closing his eyes and opening his mind, Wyrdvane reached out and found his brothers, hoar-scotched, gibbering and rocking. Halsor, his mind a placid lake. Urim, his anger burning as bright as the fires he could conjure with a thought. Like a choir of voices rising in harmony, the Wyrdvanes entwined their thoughts as they had been trained, gathering power to themselves and shutting out the whispering temptations of the warp. The Psykers' spirits quested outward, the gloom no obstacle to their witch sight. There amongst the ruins, lithe Xenos forms crept ever closer to the unsuspecting Valhallans. Rising to their feet, the exhilaration of unity singing through their minds, Wyrdvane and his brothers focused their power to a single furious point. The night lit up with psychic fire as a roaring bolt of energy lashed out, engulfing the screaming Drukhari and turning them to ash. As he returned to his body, Wyrdvane noted the Valhallans were now wide-eyed and silent. Let them think on that, he smiled to himself, before reaching out with his mind in search of fresh Xenos to slaughter. Welcome, gentle listener. I'm Voldemort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and units of the Warhammer 40k setting, the grim darkness of the far future. Continuing the present run of entries concerning the Psykers of the Warhammer 40 setting, today we are covering the Primaris and Wyrdvane Psykers, the psychic punch of the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard. But please, don't get confused on the word Primaris. They are not Primaris Space Marines, they are just Primary Psykers. So that confusion out of the way. For the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, Wyrdvane Psykers. Wyrdvane Psykers transform the howling might of the warp into a deadly weapon of Imperial supremacy. They are formed from those Scholastica Psychana inductees not able to control their burgeoning powers without guidance and aid. Some have not yet completed the grueling training to become a Primaris Psyker. Others will never achieve that goal, introverted beyond rescue by the horrors of their own minds. As individuals, such Psykers are unpredictable and unsafe. Yet in concert, these deadly mutants can be a valuable asset. Eerily attuned to one another, Wyrdvane Psykers draw strength from communion, linking their thoughts to better slaughter the foes of mankind. Corpuscent lightning crackles around them as they marshal their powers. Moans and wails spill from their lips, tangled and stringy ropes of vomited ectoplasm. Armored battle tanks buckle inwards as the Psykers focus their power, crumpling upon horrified crew like a ration pack in an ogre's fist. Heretics are incinerated amidst billowing clouds of psychic flame. Domes of protective telekinetic force enfold quivering allied guardsmen, while pervasive many-voiced whispers talk warriors into madness or horrified self-destruction. Only once a choir of Wyrdvane Psykers has proven their ability to work as a controlled, cohesive whole will they be permitted to take the field unsupervised. The Psykers are formed into potential squads, based on the omens of the Emperor's Tarot, and must endure numerous inhumane tests before they are declared battle-ready. They must demonstrate their ability to guard one another's minds, to stabilize their companions' more volatile powers, and enhance those that flounder or fail. Many will not survive the trials to which they are subjected, and even those that do are still destined to be treated with fear, revulsion, and mistrust. Horror stories abound amongst the Astra Militarum of Wyrdvane Psykers bursting spontaneously into the flame in the midst of battle, or else becoming possessed by terrible entities and slaughtering friend and foe alike. However, the Scholastica Psychana's screening stamps out many such potential disasters before they can occur. And for every uncontrolled explosion of warp energy, there are a dozen battles where the Wyrdvanes prove their worth. Insular in the extreme, squads of Wyrdvane Psykers are only too aware of their comrades' superstitious disgust. Yet for all this, they are loyal and dedicated soldiers of the Imperium, risking their very souls to fight in defense of the Emperor's realm. Indeed, while most officers would loathe to admit it, a squad or two of Wyrdvane Psykers is often worth several times the number of proper Imperial Guardsmen. And as humanity's psychic potential squirms closer to the surface, Wyrdvane Psykers have become an increasingly common presence in Astra Militarum regiments. Primaris Psykers. Primaris Psykers are rare and extraordinary individuals who wield the destructive power of the warp as a weapon to smite the enemies of the Emperor. With a single thought, the Psyker conjures forth lightning that leaps from his hands and surrounds his body. With a gesture, he hurls those bolts of ether energy at his opponents, burning the foe's synapses and searing their flesh from their bones. Mysterious and aloof, Primaris Psykers are known as Primary Psykers, Battle Psykers, or Psycholords, and are treated with a mixture of awe, fear, and suspicion by the superstitious soldiers of the Imperial Guard. Their presence is utterly abhorrent to some commanders, and they are at best mistrusted. However, their ability to combat the blasphemous sorceries of aliens and heretics usually outweighs the natural revulsion many feel at their inclusion in the ranks of the Imperial Guard. A Primaris Psyker is typically attached to a high-ranking Astra Militarum officer who can direct the Psyker's powers as the situation necessitates, providing psychic support to the trooper on the front line. The Primaris Psyker marches to war in a uniform daubed with wards and sigils of power, carrying a staff made of rare and precious metals that can channel the psychic energy of the wielder. As part of his indoctrination and training, a Psyker will learn to focus his prodigious mental strength through this psycho-reactive staff, transforming it into a searing weapon that glows with a barely contained, otherworldly power, capable of cutting through reinforced ceramite and ripping the life force from those it strikes. Of all the Psykers judged under the uncompromising gaze of the Inquisition, only those whose mental fortitude is great enough have the merest glimmer of hope of becoming a Primaris Psyker in the Astra Militarum. Battle Psykers are by no means the most powerful of their kind, but even so, they walk a fine line between service of the Emperor and eternal damnation. Every time they unleash their powers, they risk predation from the denizens of the warp. Demonic entities swarm to their bright Psyker soul like moths to a flame. Several failsafes are therefore built into a Psyker's wargear. Complex microcircuitry and neuroactive wiring are connected to psychically attuned crystals embedded in a Psyker's hood or collar, designed to bleed away excessive warp energy. Such precautions are not limited to the Psyker's wargear alone, and most have undergone cranial surgeries to implant neural inhibitors that limit the danger of possession. However, such devices tend to blunt the Psyker's innate power as well. When combined with a lifetime of training, a Primaris Psyker has a reasonable chance of avoiding powerful psychic enemies and resisting demonic influences. For those who prove to be too weak, however, there is always the final safeguard in the shape of the smoking muzzle of a commissar's bolt pistol. End quote. With the psychic awakening in full swing, it is rather likely that the Imperium will weaponize Psykers like never before, so these units may well become a mainstay in the forces of the Imperium. But it does lead us to another question. What will be their role or position now that the Ecclesiarchy, the Ministorum, the Church, can perform their own miracles without the tarnishing of their souls by being Psykers? Does this mean that Psykers will be used in huge numbers as cannon fodder for a new and more aggressive Imperium? Or will they be hounded and hunted into the waiting arms of chaos, and, most specifically, Magnus the Red and his psychic revolution? Or will Reboot Guilliman, the Avenging Sun, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, merely consider them a new resource that he can codify the training thereof? Will he harness this newly awakening power and use it in tandem with the newly exhibited powers of faith? Or will Reboot, a man of logic and of the Imperial truth, find this one step too far, one lump just too rich to swallow? Only time will tell. I have been Voldemort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this brief introduction to the Primaris and Wyrdvane Psykers of the Astra Militarum. If so, then do please consider liking and subscribing. If so, then do hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make time for fun. Toodaloo.